Hey people, John here from Fast Films, and today we're going to go through a 2021 horror movie called The Devil's Tale. The movie begins with a nurse, Rose, arriving for her shift at the hospital where she just started working. As she makes her way into the hospital, a bleeding man comes from behind and watches her do her thing. The scene then shifts to another story. An old man walks up to a train station receptionist and asks her when the train from Ipswich will arrive. The receptionist tells him that the train is delayed and he would have to wait for some minutes. The old man sits beside a woman and her son on a bench. He brings out a Bible and starts reading. Inside the Bible is a photograph of himself and his father when he was young. A black dog can also be seen standing beside him in the picture. The man converses with the boy beside him about cows. A flashback scene then shows the old man's father forcing him to shoot a cow. Back in the present day, the woman notices that the old man has just been released from prison. She immediately takes her son and leaves. Later that night, the old man is still waiting at the train station for his train. He visits the vending machine, but he starts having weird feelings about it. He hears the sound of a dog coming toward him, and this causes him to panic. He immediately runs into the restroom. Inside the restroom, he has flashes about his past. He once forcefully made out with a young woman and also ate a piece of her. Now, in the present day, the station agent finds an old man gasping for air inside the restroom and calls for medical aid. As she takes her ear closer to the man's mouth to check whether he's breathing, the old man wears an evil smile. Back at the hospital, Rose is looking after her patient, Mr. Dallas, when another nurse, Alice, comes in. She makes a few adjustments and tells Rose to buzz her if she needs anything. Seconds later, Rose finds Alice at the reception and tells her that she forgot her medical tray. Alice then tells Rose that the room she's currently working in is called Mr. Moore's room. Rose tries to know more about the room, but Alice says she needs to attend to something else. The scene moves to another story. Three ladies, Maddie, Joe, and Ash, are seen in their car having a discussion about which concert to attend or not. They soon arrive at the house they just rented for their time in the town. The trio meets the landlord, Dean. He tries having a conversation with them, but they are not comfortable with him. They soon realize that there is no network coverage in the area. Joe checks the freezer and finds a human hand inside. The girls debate whether to call the cops or not. They realize that if they involve the cops, they will miss out on the festival. They decide to call the cops after the festival. Later that night, the trio arrives back home with three other guys to spend the night with. The next day, Dean and his friend, Carl, invite the girls over for a drink, but they refuse. One of them decides that they should leave, but the other two say there's nothing to be scared about. Just then, Joe checks the freezer and finds more human hands in it. She immediately tells her friends that they need to leave. They get to the door but realize the new locks have been fixed on it. Dean and Carl come from behind and ask the girls to sit down. Dean then serves the trio with human meat. Ash tastes the meat and immediately vomits. She is then taken away by Dean. While Dean is gone, Joe begs Carl to use the restroom. Dean returns and tells Carl to check on Joe. Maddie insults Dean, and he is forced to take her away and lock her up with Ashley. Joe manages to arm herself with a pen. She comes from behind, attacks Dean, and gets the keys to the car. Joe sneaks out and releases her friends who are tied up in the garage. The trio quickly arm themselves and wait for Dean and his friend to show up. The girls sneakily take out their assailants and tell the dying Dean that he is not entitled to women's attention. Back at the hospital, Rose checks under the bed and sees something weird. She stands up and sees a man bleeding all over his body. This scares her, and she runs out of the room. She runs into another nurse, Steve. Steve says people tend to freak out in the hospital. The scene then changes to another story. The story shows a girl, Sarah, arriving at a dirty pool. She takes off her clothes and prepares to swim. As she's about to enter the pool, a man also emerges from the pool and makes his way to his van. Across the bridge, three ladies start making fun of Sarah because of her big stature. They taunt her while she's inside the pool. After they're done messing with her, they take her bag and clothes and run away. Sarah is forced to walk on the highway in her bikini. Some men pass by her and make fun of her. She enters a crossroad and sees the van from the pool. Just then, the man from the pool carries something into the van and slowly drives past her. She looks into the back and sees the girls that were bullying her asking for help. She ignores them, and the man drops her clothes and bag before driving off. The story ends with Sarah putting on her headphones and listening to loud music. Now at the hospital, Rose asks Steve to tell her about Mr. Moore's room. He tells Rose that Mr. Moore was a man who was admitted to the hospital many years ago. He suffered burns on 80% of his body. He screamed and moaned in pain that medication couldn't even help him. Nobody was ready to take care of him because anytime someone goes near, he grabs them and asks for help because the pain was too much. He had to be restrained to his bed. One night, a nurse enters the room but couldn't find Mr. Moore on the bed. They never saw him again after that day. It's apparent that the bleeding man is Mr. Moore. The scene then shifts to another story. A young girl, Sam, is seen in the restroom. She discovers that she just had her first period flow. She tells her friend Carrie about it. Carrie tells Sam that she needs to get her a tampon since there is no pad currently. Carrie returns with Jessica and they talk about how Sam is now a woman. After she's done, Sam leaves the restroom to join her friends at the skating rink. Jessica reminds that they won't be able to make out with Jake as she planned, but Carrie scolds her for being insensitive. Carrie and Sam enter the skating rink and start having fun. Suddenly, the lights go off, and the group decide to get something to eat at a snack shop. Trevor says the light went off because of the boogie woman. While they're there, Jessica lets it out that Sam just had her first period. Because Jake is irritated by blood, he maintains his distance away from Sam. Out of anger, Sam throws her snack at Jessica. Carrie, Jake, and Trevor leave the scene afterward. After their departure, the waiter tells Sam that she looks like her. Sam asks him what he meant by that, but he refuses to answer. Sam gets her things and leaves the skating rink. She soon realizes that Trevor is following her. Shortly afterward, Sam looks back but couldn't find Trevor. Moments later, Sam gets to an alley and sees a weird-looking woman. The woman invites Sam into her room and she follows her. Inside the room, Sam sees Trevor sitting on the chair. Sam takes off her shirt and she moves close to Trevor. The woman locks the door. The story ends with a view of a waiter standing alone at the skating rink. Back at the hospital, Rose sees the bleeding man standing across the hallway. She runs into hiding and waits for a miracle. A new story then opens. A taxidermist, Sylvie, is seen working on a rodent. After she's done, she gets into her car and drives onto the highway. Moments later, she sees a man, Oz, waving her down for a lift. Sylvie asks him what he's doing around, but Oz says it's complicated. Oz says he hasn't seen anyone around for hours, and Sylvie says she is used to that. Sylvie offers to give Oz a lift so she can listen to his story. Oz says he's been walking for 108 days now because he's needed to clear his head. As the duo discuss, a doe crosses the road and Sylvie accidentally runs it over. Sylvie gets emotional and gets out of the car. She takes a look at the doe and sees that it's going to die. Sylvie goes back to the car and gets a polythene sack. She uses the sack to snuff the life out of the doe in order to put it out of its misery. Oz and Sylvie continue their journey and Sylvie offers Oz accommodations for the night because it's getting dark already. Upon getting to Sylvie's house, Oz asks her about her work. Sylvie explains what she does and also says she is going to do the same thing to the doe. While having tea, she asks Oz about his complicated story. Oz says he decided to start walking around because the doctor told him he has little time left to live. He says he has thought so much about it and doesn't want to waste any more time thinking about it. Sylvie feels sorry for Oz and she sheds a tear. Oz asks Sylvie for a dance and she accepts. The duo hug each other and have an emotional dance. Sylvie shows Oz to his room and promises to tell him her story the following day. Sylvie goes to Oz's room where he sleeps and decides that she needs to take him out of his pain. Sylvie puts some unknown liquid on a pillow and puts it on Oz's face. She pushes down and makes sure Oz dies before letting go. The next morning, Sylvie lays Oz's body on the table and is ready to work on his body. Sylvie says Oz is going to be able to live forever this way. Now at the hospital, Rose arms herself with a surgical knife and walks to Mr. Moore's room. Upon getting to the room, she discovers that Mr. Dallas is no longer on the bed. The lights go off and something holds her leg. She looks down and sees the bleeding man holding her. She reacts and repeatedly punches the bleeding man with the surgical knife. Just then, the lights come on and Rose realizes that she just killed Mr. Dallas. The movie comes to an end by showing Mr. Moore, the bleeding man, standing behind Rose. Thanks for watching, guys.